Mr. Benedict Peters, National Disaster Coordinator. Thank you for affording the Barnacle the opportunity to speak to you one day before the official start of the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season. The hurricane season means nervous times for many persons. What does it mean to you as Nadma?
Well, it's a time for persons to understand the hazards that are accompany the hurricane. And I say that because I think understanding and knowledge of what it is likely to occur is important as being able to respond to what is going to approach them. I would like to say in the hurricane we have a number of hazards that makes up that event, and we have likely flooding, we have heavy rains, we have the possibility of airborne missiles, we have very high winds, and those are what we call the primary hazards of the hurricane. So how well people understand those hazards and how they could be impacted by it and what actions they can take to reduce that impact and to respond will give a good guide as to how comfortable I am.
Here's a question asked. During those 6 months that is called the hurricane season, what happens at Nadma?
It's a process of heightened preparation. We engage the public more. We do preparation as to response equipment. We make sure that they are serviced, purchase some where we need. We have the shelters ready for persons who might need to leave the premises, who don't feel comfortable in the event that we have indicated that a hurricane is going to make landfall in Grenada. So those are some of the things that we would do as NADMA.
What levels of advanced preparation have been undertaken to date?
We have been engaging the communities, and that is not as well as we would like to because of the COVID factor, but we have been preparing by ensuring that most of our emergency equipment is serviced. So communication has been done. We have done some work with the chainsaws and so on. We could say now we have 20 functioning chainsaws. There is still some work to do with the generators, but because of the relief effort for St. Vincent and how we have packed the warehouse, then we have to move some items before we could actually service. But those are not items to be repaired, so we have to service it. So those are the areas. So what we try to do is to make sure that our response equipment are workable in case we have to respond to the event, as well as bringing awareness to persons in the public, awareness to the public as to what to expect and the things that they need to do to make themselves as secure as possible. Because as we know that when the event occurs, you will have to deal with the event where you are. So you must have some knowledge of what you need to do and what you shouldn't do.
NADMA supposed to have, as far as I know, some outreach groups supporting
disaster community,
district
disaster committees.
You mentioned earlier on that COVID has hindered your preparation, and I'm curious to find how was COVID able to affect you, seeing that you have those disaster district committees in place?
Well, it affect because of the face-to-face involvement. So most of our work were done virtually, and it doesn't mean that everybody has that means of communicating virtually, but most of our work were done virtually, and that has slowed the face-to-face, the training preparation. So that has played a part in slowing up that process.
What are some of the things you were able to accomplish?
They did a lot of training in the communication. They did shelter management training. As I said, most of that is virtual.
But the shelter management training with this very same COVID that you're talking about is extremely crucial. So, are you satisfied that you were able to accomplish sufficient in the event?
No, well, as a person disaster, the question of sufficient is we always have room for improvement. We would have liked to do more if you're able to do more face-to-face involvement. The virtual training is important, but the face-to-face is more because you have practicals that you need to do. You have to involve persons. So some of that, based on the information I have, was not done.
What resources do you have and resources do you need to respond in the event of a natural disaster? What do you have now and what do you need?
Well, the resources that we need, what we have, let us say the response equipment. So if we've been impacted and our communication is down, we have that emergency radio communication system that will get us up. We're also looking at we haven't yet finalized everything on what we call the satellite phones and the big guns. So we have to complete that, but we have satellite phones and we have big guns. And those pieces of equipment could work without any of our communication system up. They use the satellite. So all we need to do is to decide we're going to purchase the service and we could get off the ground in communication.
What numbers of persons within these community groups, what quantity of persons do you have ready to respond?
Ready, I cannot give you a number on ready. Because as I said, the COVID experience has slowed that process significantly. So I cannot give you a number as to say 15, 20. But less than 20, under 20 is what they call it, what makes up the executive groups. And but besides that, each of the head of those executive groups have a number of groups.
What are these groups expected to do when a disaster or a hurricane is announced?
Well, when a hurricane is announced, first of all, you're asked to personal safety. So they have to take care of this, make sure that their families and so on will be safe. First of all, that they have to take their personal safety. But they are expected, if an event is like a hurricane is expected to hit land, what we call landfall, they're expected to organize the shelters. That's a major role for them at that point in time. So they will have to be responsible for opening the shelters, making arrangement to make sure we have the different facilities at the shelter to accommodate persons. In the COVID time, we'll have to ensure the protocol practice is in place. So those will be the immediate need for the event of a landfall, like the warning for a landfall or the potential landfall of a hurricane. The main role at the community level will be shelters. Post the event, then we have to go into IDA and DANA, where you're doing the assessment.
So the Met Office says that Grenada will be impacted by a hurricane tomorrow morning. What is Nadma 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plan?
Well, first of all, we'll have the EOC activated. We'll call the NEAC, the National Emergency Advisory Council. That's the first thing that will come. We'll be briefed by Met Office as to the dangers that we face by the event, and then the NEAC will then brief the cabinet or the Prime Minister in that case, because we have a separate. The Minister for Nadma is not the Prime Minister as were previously. So he'll brief the Prime Minister and Cabinet as to what happens, and then the decision will be made there, and we follow from the decision made.
And then you begin to roll out.
Yeah, as I said, the initial thing is to have shelters open where the event is likely to hit, create the impact, and the shelters need to be open, and the activities of the shelter need to roll out. That is in preparation for. And
how long after the impact of of an event, that you can find Nadma responding in terms of bringing relief to the communities?
Well, that is almost immediate, because what we have an MOU with business places to get relief. If the business places that we have an arrangement with, like if they get damaged, then we might have an issue. But that arrangement is there, so that once the vehicles could move to get there, then that won't be too long thereafter, 24 hours, 48 hours.
So,
But we advise persons to carry with 3 days supply.
a disaster means that you need serious communication, technologically advanced equipment. What role will technology play in before, during, and after a disaster?
Well, I will take the before of very important as bringing information and different forms of information in different ways. The disaster could damage that sophisticated equipment you're talking about, because a lot of the sophisticated equipment could be impacted, and that's why we talk about emergency communication. So the emergency communication is, I think, the area that we have to make sure that we have in hand, because that is where we'll have to use to communicate. But the sophisticated equipment that I talk about, keeping it safe during a hurricane is a hard task.
And after the hurricane?
After the hurricane, as I said, the emergency equipment, for example, the same communication person might have pieces of equipment that you could drive and give the service and so on. That emergency component is important.
Social media is a real headache for Nadma before, during, and after a hurricane. How do you manage in all the clutter of information that social media puts out to ensure that the right information reaches the average Grenadian?
Well, we try to ask the public to use Nadma as the official source. So whatever information that you get there, you need to make sure that you have it related or you have it compared with what Nadma is saying. Nadma and the Met Office, we are saying that is the official source. So whatever information that you get out there, you need to make sure that you do a comparison.
St. Vincent has shown you the urgency and the importance of preparation. What have you learned from the whole St. Vincent debacle recently?
A lot. You have people who, you have to do a lot of work on, as I said, people, the readiness of people is where the real preparation, the assessment or their level of readiness is the level of readiness of the agency. And we have to do a lot more work in that regard. Because, the St. Vincent, one of the areas that we have looked at is, in St. Vincent, they get supplies in, but they cannot empty the containers fast enough. So then you have people like Tropical say, we're not going to send a 40-foot container in because we're not going to get it out. So in Grenada's case, we have to decide where could we locate those containers when we move them from the port, and what are the mechanisms we're going to put in place to ensure that we could empty those containers and get them back. So we could learn that from St. Vincent experience right now, because that is one of the experience that we have. We are trying to get a 40-foot container, but Tropical will not bring in 40-foot containers to St. Vincent because it's too difficult to get them out with relief. Right? So we have that experience, and from the experience on the ground, persons still were reluctant to leave. And there are people now who, after the experience, they tell you that they will leave next time. So sometimes the persons have to have that personal experience to move, and we have that task to get done. Getting people to understand the risk and how they should respond is a tough part.
Does Nadma have a budget for this whole period?
I think there's a budget for Nadma, but I think there should be a better budget for Nadma, I would say.
Can you explain?
Well, I think Nadma has to have a larger budget that carries the whole agency. We we actually part of the ministry that we are budget. But I think we should have a bigger line item.
What amount in dollars and cents do you have available to work with? How much would be sufficient in your view?
Well, sufficient is a hard word to answer, but I will go for about just over just under $1 million.
That would help you in your disaster response.
It will help.
In procuring equipment or in responding after an event?
No. Preparation is a significant component in that whole process. How well you respond depends on how well you prepare. I think there is three major areas in disaster management. Your mitigation preparation, right? And your response. Those are the areas that actually I think are very important, because any of those areas could influence your recovery and your reconstruction and recovery. And I think that's where we have to put major emphasis. And that's where we call resilience, because at those are the areas, those are the phases where you build resilience. And if you are resilient, then your ability to survive the impact is much better. And I think that's where we have to put most of because in recovery, we could also influence how well we recover based on that three phases. If I give an example, we go to a cricket game and we have mitigation, right? So you put on your pads and you have your shin pads and you have a helmet and so on. You have taken measures to reduce the likely impact if a ball hits you. But it is possible that it could hit you and you get hurt. At that point in time, if you have an ambulance, if you have an emergency escape route, if you have an arrangement with the hospital, that preparation, if that preparation is in place, if the result of the impact could be influenced. If a traffic lockdown is a different situation to if you have a free line of traffic to move forward. So although you have taken action to reduce the impact of that ball, but you get hit, whatever the preparation you have to move someone to the hospital, the healthcare system that you have on site, that preparation, it will also influence the result.
How much of all this preparation you're referring to is Nadma's initiative, and how much of it is dependent on external forces?
A lot is dependent on external forces, but the initiative, Nadma initiative is to bring awareness. Well, I want to call it empowerment. I think we have to reach a point where empower. I don't think awareness get the movement that I'm talking about. So we have to reach a point of empowerment. And that's why it's important to start with the young children, so they develop that affinity and that want to respond. And we have to break it down to everyday life. We want you to prepare to respond to events that could so affect you that it will depend on more resources than you have. In a disaster, we talk about a community being affected to the point where the resources that it has is not enough to respond. And on the national level, the resources that it has is not enough to respond. But that could happen to persons in their daily lives, in their families, and so on. So we are saying that we want the persons to reach to the stage where they could apply that whole concept of disaster management. And that will take some work, but I think that's where we have to go.
As you sit here one day before the commencement of the 2021 Atlantic hurricane season, what troubles you, what pleases you?
The preparation, the preparedness of the general public.
Troubles you or pleases you?
I think troubles me. I think the preparation I don't think there are where I would like to see them.
Anything pleases you?
Yes. I mean, we just before the hurricane, we have a building that is built. The building is built. It's handover. We have the keys for the building, so we have access to the building. I think it's a very safe building. So if there is an event of that nature, we can pass that event in that building if we so choose to. So I think that as I said, we have the response equipment, communication, and some of the equipment for responding is there. We have a PR person who is on board and is continue to promote the work of the agency and the different ideas that need to be understood in what I call building resilience. So there are things that pleases me.
Final question. What is your message to the Grenadian people right now?
The message to the Grenadian people is to listen to the official stations, Nadma and the Met Office. No matter wherever you get your information, ensure that it's compared with. And get an understanding, look at the different hazards that comes with the hurricane. Look at the resources that you have that you want to protect, so those hazards do not damage them. How can you protect them? If you can't protect them, how could you get help to protect them? Or what actions you could take so that you reduce the loss of those items? I think that is what I want to tell the public right now, that we have high winds, we have the likelihood of missiles, airborne missiles carried by the high winds, we have heavy rains, we have likely flooding, and those hazards are likely to accompany a hurricane. The items that you have or the resources that you have that you do not want to lose, ask yourself, how could they be affected by those hazards? What can I do to reduce the hazard impacting those resources that I have? And how best could I protect them so that I will have them after the impact of the hurricane? I also want to mention to persons who will choose to transfer their risk insurance, make sure that your policy is current at the time, because you never know, sometimes persons have insurance and they slip and they did not pay the insurance. If that occur, you might not be, your risk might not be transferred as you intended it for it to be. So those are the things I'm saying. You have documents that you don't want to lose. Make sure that you protect it from the elements that I mentioned. And I think that's what I would like the public to get. Being able to understand the resources that they possess, the likelihood of losing those resources, how can we protect those resources from the hazards that comes with the hurricane, and how to ensure that after the event passes, you have those items. For example, you might need to take pictures to make a comparison of before and after. For example, some things might get damaged, and the extent of it, you need to show those pictures. And that could also help in the process.
Benedict Peters, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you very much.